Jonathan Soriano. I will be your presenter for today, and I hope you learned something from me, especially in the working knowledge of MikroTik. Okay, so let me introduce myself. I am a networking enthusiast. I'm a contract worker based here in Saudi Arabia, and I work as an IT support at Taxi Foods. So I've been a MikroTik user since 2011. I am also an unofficial trainer. I used to help people in having a working knowledge of MikroTik RouterOS, both here in Saudi Arabia and back in my home country, in the Philippines. So I have these following certifications: MTCNA, CWE, CUME, CRE, and CTCE. So I would like to show you one of our, here are my unofficial training in the Philippines. So here are the people that I helped to have a working knowledge with MikroTik RouterOS. So I hope that you also have a good grasp on what I'm going to present today. Title of my presentation is Identifying and Managing Traffic in RouterOS. So this is the most common challenge for us. Usually, applications are sometimes slow, voice call drops at times, or most probably your video stream is always buffering. So how do we manage this in MikroTik RouterOS? I will show you how. But first, we'll have to identify it. We'll have to identify the sources of these challenges. So we have to go to our why. I've identified here 5 whys. Number 1 is slow link to the service provider network. Number 2 is poor physical and logical network planning and implementation. Number 3, underpowered hardware. Number 4, malicious software, online and offline threats. And number 5, excessive downloaders and uploaders. So probably we have this in our network. We're going to be focusing on number 5. So I have grouped my slides into 2. First is identification using filter, mangle, DNS, and address list. And the second part would be managing it using queues, both simple queue and queue tree. First, let us define identify. Identify to recognize something. So how do we recognize a traffic in RouterOS? I will show you. First, we could identify using the MAC address. As you can see here, one way to manage traffic is to block it using the firewall filter rules. We identified the abusive MAC address, abusive device, using the MAC address. Or we could identify also using an IP address. See, we could block the MAC address and block the IP address. The next one would be by the use of the mangle facility. Mangle facility of MikroTik is very powerful. Here we could identify the port, protocol, then we could mark it, then we could manage it later on in the queues. So here, as you can see, I've marked it, the most common ports for web browsing, which is port 80, 443. For speed test would be for 8080. I've marked both protocols, TCP and UDP. So as you can see here, it's a step-by-step. We're starting from identifying of the port and protocol, mark the connection using a connection mark, then mark the packet. That is a very good question, sir. We don't have a pass-through for the packet so that it may stop the processing of the packet, the processing of the data. So it should stop from here. I will show you the Mangle table. So first, we've made the marking of the connection. We have the pass-through enabled, as you can see here. It is enabled, it has a check mark. And next would be the marked packet. It doesn't have a pass-through, so it will stop there. It won't be processed furthermore at the bottom, in order for us not to have duplicate markings. So we should stop it from the packet. That's why we don't have the check mark at the pass-through. Okay, so this is an example of the Mangle. The second would be the connection bytes. This is a very good feature of MikroTik, wherein we could mark the connection. Here we are marking 3 megabytes and above. I've marked this as a large file download. So anyone who's downloading a 3 megabytes file and above would be marked as a large file download. Here you can see I've used again the mark connection with the pass-through enabled, and after that, mark packet without the pass-through. We'll go next to see the Mangle. So as you can see here, I've put a comment, download that is more than 3 MB. So it will categorize, it will identify the traffic that is more than 3 megabytes. So it is important here that this connection mark would be at the top of the marked packet. So the sequence is very important. If you got the wrong sequence, there is no packet that you could mark. It will be staying at the 0 bytes. So it will be useless. The first rule that I've made is rule number 0 and number 1, then followed by rule number 2 and number 3. So as you can see, we have a pass-through. So after the packets is processed at rule number 0 and rule number 1, it will be delegated to rule number 2 and number 3. So if the packet is more than 3 MB in size, it will be categorized as a 3M packet. So you can see here, I have a packet mark that is 3M. It's named 3M packet. It will be a large file download. Then after that, I put the rule number 4 for 3M packet, so it will stop there. It won't be processed any further. So this rule is very useful, especially for categorizing and identifying video streams or downloading of video files or MP3s or mostly media files, probably from Dropbox, Google Drive. We could use this in those applications. From this, we could separate the normal web browsing and the downloading. The next would be layer 7. I'm sure most of you are familiar with the layer 7 protocol. This is used in identifying video streams, especially in YouTube. Now I will show you an example of it. Layer 7 can be found in the IP firewall. So here an example of layer 7. So as you can see, there is a video playback, video and watch. So any packet that has these signatures will be matched, and it will be identified as a video streaming. But take note that this facility is very CPU intensive, CPU power intensive, and it's not recommended for usage of mostly entry-level MikroTik routers. So better think twice in using this, or make sure that you have enough hardware power. So here we're going to mark again the connection for video streaming. So you can see here I've identified it as a layer 7 protocol with the video streaming. Mark the connection, then mark the packet. It's the same thing that we've done before. These are all found in the Mangle section. And here's now your Mangle table. So as you can see here in the Mangle table, I have moved the layer 7 at the very top. So I can identify first which are the video streams before marking it at the bottom. The next feature would be getting it from the DNS cache. Here, MikroTik has a very good feature of caching the DNS if you use the MikroTik's DNS cache, or if you use the MikroTik router as a DNS cache. You can see this under IP, DNS, then DNS cache. When you open the DNS cache and find for video or YouTube, you can find here that there are multiple addresses. These are the sources of video for YouTube. So using a DNS script found in the MikroTik wiki, I can get, or I can sort all those addresses, all those URLs with the video in their URL. And using this feature, we can easily identify which one is coming from YouTube, which one is coming from Facebook, which one is coming from other media streaming providers. So here I've tasked it to find the video. The script, you can see it here. It's looking for the video word. So anything with the video word, it will be put in the address list. So later on that, we'll first see the script. So the script is running for, in my example, it's running for every 5 seconds. So every 5 seconds, the script is running and looking for the video in the URL of the DNS cache, in the DNS cache. So this is a smart way of knowing which connections or which traffic is passing through. So here you can see my address list at the firewall Mangle. You can see them that all those videos, they are categorized dynamically. Dynamically meaning it is automatically added because of the script and because of the scheduler. So it is automatically added with a timeout of 30 minutes. Yeah, with a timeout of 30 minutes. So it will be gone in 30 minutes. So these URLs, they will be refreshed and they will be gone in 30 minutes, as long as there are people who are using this one. So based on this address list, I've named it as YouTube. On the firewall Mangle, I will put destination address list. So any connection, any traffic going to those URL or going to those IP address will be classified as video streaming. Here we will go back to our Mangle table again. So since we know that layer 7 is a very CPU intensive resource, I've decided to put it at rule number 1 and have the address list at rule number 0. So the address list would be able to classify the traffic first before going to the layer 7. Or most probably we could disable layer 7 altogether and we could use the address list. Next one would be classifying other traffic. Other traffic, if you can see here, I have identified traffics from port 1000 to port 65535. So this is the whole ports and TCP and UDP. You may be asking why. How can we identify torrents? Any ideas? Okay, so for torrents, it is a bit tricky since some of the torrents are using SSL, they're using secured ports, and most of them cannot be recognized. So that's why I've shown you how to use the DNS cache. We could find for a torrent, or we could use also the connection bytes. This is a very helpful feature. So these are some of the ways that we could control the traffic. Now we will proceed to the second part of my presentation, which is manage. We define manage as maintain control over something. Now, after we identified, we are now going to control. We are now going to manage your traffic. Here in Saudi Arabia, if you've been in the airport, you can see that the immigration are identifying the visitors, identifying as first-time arrivals or arrivals with exit re-entry visa and GCC nationals. Are these familiar with you? Yes? And this, we could also identify them using classes. Here I've shown you a very practical example of a class type. In the toll plaza, we are identifying the class 1 vehicles as personal car, passenger cars. Class 2 as commercial vehicles, bus and trucks. And class 3 as heavy vehicles and heavy trucks. So we are doing this exactly the same in managing our network. We're identifying which classes or which ones have the highest priority over others. So here's an example of a toll plaza. So you can see here in the picture that buses are here. They're nicely organized and sorted out. Passenger cars are here. And of course, the heavy trucks have their own place. So this is what we are going to do in MikroTik RouterOS. This is just a visual representation of how we are going to manage our traffic. In RouterOS, we have two facilities for managing traffic. One is simple queue, and one is Q3. So in simple queue, we could manage them via IP address. So here you can see that I'm using a parent and child. So the users under here, user 2 up to 256, 254, yeah. They're under the parent of total. I will show you how. So first we should make a parent queue. So this is the top parent. So for example, we have a download of 25 Mbps and an upload of 5 Mbps. We go to the advanced, click on the queue type with the PCQ upload default and download default. Next, we will be making the child queue. It's the same process, but the difference would be found at the advanced tab. The advanced tab, you could see parent. We should specify the parent. So you can see this. This is the sample of the simple queue. So here it is important that you would put a limit on the child queues. You could put an unlimited limit, 0. So it would probably not make sense since we want to manage our traffic, right? So we should put a limit here if you want to manage them per IP address. And let's go now to the Q3. The Q3 is where MikroTik shines the most. It is where the firewall mangle is being used at its fullest. Here, as you can see, we've made pocket marks a while ago, right? As you can see in our example, we have made the connection mark and the packet mark. The packet mark, we will be using it here at Q3. Here at Q3, the beauty of Q3 is you could process these packets in parallel. Unlike in simple queue, Unlike in simple queue, the order of the rules is very important. You can see there is a numbered sequence here that should be followed. So in simple queue, I would like to take an important note that in simple queue, the first rule, rule number 1, rule number 2, and rule number 3, the first rule at the top would be processed first before processing the rules at the bottom. So take note of that when using simple queue. Unlike in Q3, they work in parallel. So they could process both times. There's no sequence of order in Q3. So in Q3, as you can see here, I've divided the traffic streams into download and upload. Here, when you take the MikroTik certification, MikroTik MTCNA, you would find more background on the packet flow. It is very important that you know the packet flow, how the packet flows into the network. And if you want to further your studies, I would advise you to take MTCTCE, which is the traffic control engineer course of the MikroTik. At MTCTCE, most of these facilities are being discussed in full detail, especially the guaranteed, limit at, priority, and most of the queue types. So right now, I'm just going to give you a brief presentation of how we could have a working knowledge of this. So you could try this at home, you could try this right now, or you could try it in the future when you are ready. First, I would like you to show the network diagram. So I base my presentation on a default setting of MikroTik. So any MikroTik router that you have, mostly with probably with wireless or without wireless, as long as it has more than 2 ports, this would be the default setting. So usually we have the local bridge. This is what the guy from before was telling, that there is a bridge that we should make, because this bridge would be beneficial for the creation of this Q3. Because what the bridge does is bridging 2 interfaces, especially if your router has a wireless interface and an Ethernet interface. So we could capture the traffic from both interfaces, not only for the wired interface. So that's why we're having this bridge. First, let us show you the Q3. In the Q3, I'll show you that I've made the download with the parent of local bridge, and the upload with the parent of Ether1. So as you can see here, I'm just using the queue type of PCQ download default, and the queue type for the upload is PCQ upload default. So I'm having a limit at. A limit at, for the sake of information of everybody, is a reserve, is a guaranteed. So in other words, you might be familiar with CIR. This is what the limit at means. And the max limit is the maximum limit. It is the maximum speed that you could attain. In other terms, these are what we call MIR. So if you can see here that I've limited it at 5 megabytes, 5 Mbps, megabits, sorry, for download, and for upload is 1 Mbps. So this is a sample of the Q3. Next would be making the child queues. So we're not only making one, but we're making for one of each packet mark that we made in the firewall mangle. So here I've made one for every parent. I've made one for download. I've made one for upload. So as you can see, the packet mark for the web traffic, the parent is download. So I name it as WebD, because you can't have the same name in Q3. You should have this different. So for simplicity's sake, I've named it WebD. The other one would be WebU. This is for upload. So this is the sample wherein the child queues are made. So for the example, I've only made WebD, but for the others, we could make the others for web packet, other packet, video packet, and 3M packet. So this presentation is very good for you to test it at home or test it right now, because this will help you in managing your network and to fully recognize and fully learn MikroTik. We should not stop learning. These examples here are just basic. So I urge everybody to discover something new, experiment something new, and be creative. The sky is your limit. As what the great artist painter said, I am still learning. So any questions from the audience? Yes, sir.
Can we prioritize voice traffic over VPN? Because here in Saudi Arabia, it's very common now that they have a telephone system, and they want remote users to, call from their remote sites or home.
This is a very good question, sir. For prioritizing VPN or
voice traffic over VPN.
Yes,
yeah, that's good.
we could prioritize using the SCP of your preferred service. For example, if you're using Avaya, you're using Grandstream, usually they have DSCP markings. We could use this in the firewall mangle, and I urge you to explore the feature. It is very exciting. Whenever you see these bytes going in, it means that it is working. Any other questions from the audience? Yes.
For your nice presentation. I would ask about the quiz with applicability for higher number. If you have to mark the packet, when you have some certain of users, this will be applicable. But once we reach to 1,000 or a higher number, it will be a very overload over the routers, and it will make the connection very slow, especially when using the DNS cache, and also it needs a bigger size memory, and it's also coming flushing the DNS from time to time. So this will make the connection very slow, as what I have practiced myself. So would you advise for your managing the packet by your way to save certain of user? How many user can be this way to be applicable? Thank you.
This is a very good observation, sir. And I would like to inform everybody that the number one bottleneck would be the person. Because if you are not creative or you are not technical enough to know the features or know the facility, you would not be able to optimize the rules to make them more efficient. The hardware is secondary, because you could get the best hardware in the planet. You could get the best hardware from MikroTik, but if the person who is managing it is not experienced, you know what I mean. So I urge you to keep on learning, and I urge you to be creative. The key word here is optimization, efficiency, just like the Japanese. Any more other questions? None? Okay. So enjoy the rest of the month, and for lunch, we could chat with each other. If you have any other questions that you are shy to ask here at the stage, you could find me there at the lounge area. And thank you very much for your time, and thank you very much for listening.